war or violence, civil war, random acts of violence, something. But bloodshed is now inevitable because of this Supreme Court ruling. I encourage you to go online and to find the book written by David Walker called The Appeal. Or if you just put in David Walker's Appeal, you'll find it. David Walker was a young black man in his early 30s who wrote a very prophetic and terrifying book. He wrote it in the 1930s. In it, he declared that bloodshed was going to come to the South as retribution for slavery. And he predicted that God Almighty would make brothers rise up against each other. He literally predicted civil war in his book. Now, the reason I say now that bloodshed is inevitable is because of the blood that is crying from the ground for vengeance. Number one, the blood of babies is crying out from the ground for vengeance. And a nation will reap what it sows. We have sown the blood of tens of millions of innocent babies, and that blood is crying for vengeance, and we will reap bloodshed. The second thing, though, is if you look at Sodom and Gomorrah, the judgment of God that fell on Sodom and Gomorrah, they were all killed. They were all killed except for Lot, his two daughters, and his wife. And then his wife died because she looked back. But fast forward from Sodom and Gomorrah, where God showed clearly what he felt about this tragic, abominable, sinful behavior that the Supreme Court has now said is on par with marriage. Fast forward to the books of the law, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And you will see that God commissioned the Jews to come and to take what was for them the promised land. But for the 7 Canaanite nations, they were involved in what? Killing their children and homosexual acts. And God said, do not do the things that these nations are doing, that I'm driving out before you. Because if you do, the land will vomit you out as it has vomited out the inhabitants that were there before you. Those inhabitants were vomited out by war, by the sword of the Jews. Now, for those of you who need a little theological lesson, again, for the family of God, fast forward to the book of Romans in the New Testament. The book of Romans, where Paul discusses that they changed the natural relationship between men and women for an unnatural one. Men committing with men horrific acts and women with women. And Paul went on to say that those who practice such things are worthy of death. And he said, he condemned those who were encouraging them in it. Read these passages for yourself, okay? So this now goes to some people in the church, some pastors, some evangelicals, some Catholics who say, well, God is merciful. That was the Old Testament. We don't have to worry about that now. No, there is no shadow of turning in him. We cannot say that God has made lying under oath in a court of law, bearing false witness against your neighbor, that he has now made that not a sin. Or that now it's no longer a sin to covet what your neighbor has. It's no longer a sin to commit adultery. It's no longer a sin to commit murder. We cannot say that the law of God, the 10 Commandments, have changed. Well, now it's okay with God if we worship false idols and sacrifice to demons because we're not under the Old Testament anymore. Don't you see? It's absurd. But beyond it being absurd, it's a crime against God. It's a crime against man. It's a crime against our families. Will you stop now and think of the perversion that this is unleashing? There's going to be people, maybe myself included, who end up going to jail for hate crimes, for saying the truth. And they're going to want us to put our children in school and to teach our children that this is normal. I'll be right back. I want to talk more about that. Are you prepared to tell your children, who aren't even old enough yet to understand the birds and the bees, that this horrific abomination, this crime against God and man, is normal and to be respected? One of the greatest joys and passions that I have had for almost my entire life is music. And one of the best times that I had was putting together some albums in Nashville of songs that I wrote. One of the albums is called Dark Sunglasses Day. This is a country album, a lot of love songs, some patriotic music. We've made it available to you online, and I hope that you'll go take a listen. You might be pleasantly surprised. You might even find yourself singing along.